Today gamers, we're going to be jumping into a bit of Lies of P, and I'm going to be going over the stats, attributes and some of the statuses that you should know about in order to get the most from the game and what's going on with your character. If that interests you, then stay tuned. That's coming up next. So today we're looking at Lies of P, the newly released Souls-like game that can be a bit of a nightmare. This game is pretty tough, especially for people that aren't used to these type of games, and has a few new mechanics and terms that you just may not be used to. As such, I'm going to be going through everything that you need to know in order to give you the best possible start to the game. So very early on in the game, you're going to make your way through, you're going to tackle some enemies, and you're going to have certain bosses and sub-bosses that you're going to have to eliminate. When you get past this very first sub-boss, then it's going to allow you to proceed a little bit further through some double doors, and you're going to find your very first Stargazer. At this point, you're going to be greeted with this screen just here, where you can invest your ergo and upgrade your character. This is great, but at this point there aren't really many tooltips explaining exactly what's going on, so I'm going to run you through what each of them means and why you may well be investing in them. So the first one, nice and easy, Vitality. This is pretty much going to be your equivalent of health. It's going to increase your maximum HP. It's also going to increase your guard regain, meaning if you've taken a bit of damage, you're going to get more health back if you attack an enemy after a successful parry. It's also going to increase your defense against physical, fire, electric, blitz and acid. Jumping over to Vigour, think of this as your different term for stamina. This is going to allow you to kind of dodge, roll, attack more often, and it's also going to increase again your defense against physical, fire, electric blitz and acid. Over to your capacity, this one is going to be how much weight you can carry, the amount of weight you can carry before it affects you, for example when you go into your fat rolls, making life difficult, and it's also going to increase your Legion max ammo for an arm. It's also going to increase your defense against physical, fire, electric, blitz and acid. Over to Motivity, think of this as your kind of strength option. This is going to increase damage for weapons and Legion arms with Motivity scaling, which most times tend to be the heavier and slightly slower weapons. And it's also going to increase again your defense against physical, fire, electric blitz and acid. Over to Technique, this one is pretty much the equivalent of Dexterity. It's going to increase damage for weapons and Legion arms with Technique scaling, and Technique weapons tend to be smaller and slightly faster most times. Again, every time you upgrade this, it's going to increase your defense for physical, fire, electric blitz and acid. Now if you've played Souls-like games before, such as Elden Ring or Dark Souls 3, you'll probably understand the scaling, but if you haven't played these before, then all you should know is that most times you'll probably be speccing in a certain path. For example, you'd go mainly through Motivity, which would be your strength, or you'd go down the Technique path, scaling into your Dexterity. If we jump over to the weapons, this will show you exactly how that works. The higher up that you've got for this scaling, so with this one I've got a big old sword on my shoulder, and the Motivity is B, with the Technique being D. This means overall I'm going to get a lot more damage if I'm scaling into Motivity, whereas a little bit of it will carry across if I've got some Technique. But ultimately this one scales mostly to Motivity, so if this was my ideal weapon, then that would be the one I'd be upgrading most, in order to get the most damage from this weapon. However, jumping over to Advanced, there are a few special cases. This one increases your Legion, it increases the damage for weapons and Legion arms with advanced scaling, and most times these tend to be ones with slightly added effects. For example, if they gave off fire, electricity, poison, things such as that. It also increases the resistance to shock, disruption and break status effects, and this is the only one that actually does that. So if you struggle with those, this one may be something you want to look at. Now if we jump over to the character screen, a lot of these we've gone over now, so I won't go over all of them, but one you may want to know about will be your Legion. That's going to be your big old left arm, whatever you've got on that. This one will scale exactly the same as your weapons after a certain type, for example Special or Motivity, and the more you have invested in this, the more often you'll be able to use it. Fable slots are going to allow you to use your special moves on that weapon blade or the handle, and some of them consume more Fable than others. Later on, when you get into your P organ system, basically your upgrade for your character, you'll be able to enhance this further by being able to put a few more on if you wanted to. Guard regain, which we've touched on earlier, if you've been hit by an enemy, you'll have some HP that's recoverable. If you manage to parry and then attack them within a certain window, you're going to be able to get some back. The higher the guard regain, the more health you'll get back quicker. Over to the right hand side, and we've got your damage reduction and your resistances. Most of these are pretty obvious. The higher up they are, better it will help you to negate whatever effect's going on. For example, if you had massive physical resistance, if you're getting hit in the face, you're going to take less damage. But a few of the ones you may well want to know about is going to be overheat. This affects you and the monsters the same. Overheat occurs when fire damage builds up. Both your character and the monsters will take increased fire damage and receive continuous fire damage as well. In addition, monsters will experience slower natural HP recovery, and your character's guard regain recovery amount will decrease. The higher your fire resistance, the slower the overheat's gauge charge speed. If you want to get rid of this, you're going to need to use a purification ampoule to remove the status ailments. Over to electric shock. This is going to occur when electricity blitz damage builds up, and both your character and the monsters will take increased electric blitz and physical damage. Your character will receive continuous damage to your Fable slots, making it harder to do those special moves. Monsters will experience increased stagger damage, and the higher the electric blitz resistance, the slower the electric shock gauge charge speed. Again, a purification ampoule is what you're going to be using to get rid of this. Over to decay. Decay occurs when acid damage builds up. For both your characters and the monsters, it increases the acid damage taken, and it inflicts continuous weapon durability and acid damage on your character. This one can be a bit of a nightmare. Nobody likes trying to kind of sort out their weapon in the heat of battle, so this may well be one you want to avoid. It increases the destruction damage dealt to monsters, and the higher your acid resistance, the slower the decay gauge fills. Again, using a purification ampoule will remove this status effect. Next up, and we have corruption. Corruption occurs when corruption damage builds up. When the status effect triggers, your character's HP continually drains. You are going to want to make sure you have quite a few of these purification ampoules ready, because there's some ailments and status effects in this that are absolute destroyers to your health, and this is definitely one of them. Speaking of a destroyer to your health, next up we have disruption. Disruption occurs when disruption damage builds up, and when the gauge is all the way filled up, your character will just pop. So you're going to want to make sure that you catch it in time, use a purification ampoule, otherwise this one's pretty much a straight game over. Over to shock, and this one's not going to be the shock you're thinking of. It's not like an electric shock. When in shock, your character's stamina recovery immediately decreases. This is just going to make your life a whole bunch harder. Everyone knows that if you can't block, you can't dodge, you can't run in games such as this, you're pretty much in trouble. So you're going to want to clear this status effect as fast as possible. And lastly, we have break. When in break, your character's HP recovery through pulse cells immediately decreases. This means being able to get back your health and regen everything is going to be a nightmare, so that's another ailment that you'll definitely want to be aware of. Right, hopefully that covers pretty much everything and you're set to go now. There's going to be a lot more content from me. As always, Wolf Friends Gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.